So, hi, I'm Rachel, and I'm going to be talking today about pastoral care for those in a cross-cultural context. Um, Obviously, as elders and pastors and leaders of churches and pastoral carers, you've got lots of experience in pastoral care. So I'm not going to be looking generally at pastoral care. I'm just going to be looking obviously at how we do that in a cross-cultural context, because there's obviously unique challenges that cross-cultural workers face when they're overseas. So we're just going to be looking at those aspects. By way of introduction, I spent 9 years overseas in the Middle East, church planting with my husband and my daughters. I've got 3 children. And we returned to the UK 3 years ago, and I've been working as a counsellor in that time. So firstly, what I wanted to say was that what you do as sending churches in supporting and caring for those who are overseas is hugely important. It's not just caring for people, you're actually reaching the ends of the earth and the Great Commission to all nations. If people are pastorally cared for in a really good way while they're overseas, you're actually equipping them to serve and stay overseas for longer. And in caring for workers, you're genuinely helping to lay the foundations and building the church in unreached nations, which is really exciting to know that you're partnering in the gospel going to the nations. So firstly, I wanted to look at when someone's preparing to go overseas, what are some of the unique challenges that they might face? So from the stage of being called to go, they've decided that they're going to go, they've ticked all the boxes, they know where they're going to go, and they're in the process of getting ready to go. What does that look like? And what could some of the unique challenges be? Well, obviously, there's going to be a huge amount of practical arrangements that they're going to need to look at, things that need to be done to relocate overseas. So selling their house, packing everything up, thinking about, what do I keep, what do I not keep, pension contributions, how that's covered while they're away, selling their car, leaving their job. What about healthcare and tax? So they're going to be thinking about all of these things, which is, quite a lot to prepare for and think about, and a lot of practical stuff to do. So there's going to be times when they feel quite stressed, quite overwhelmed with just the detail that they're going to have to be involved in to prepare to go. Saying goodbyes. There's going to be so many people that they have to say goodbye to, and they'll be experiencing obviously grief and the loss of that, and there'll be changes in their relationships with their friends and family. So they're going to be, every time they say goodbye to another person for the last time, it's going to be hugely emotionally challenging for them. And then telling wider family and friends about their plans to go overseas. I know that when we told our friends and family, we had mixed responses. So, my parents had questions about taking our daughters overseas. They were concerned about, well, what about going overseas with girls to a Middle Eastern context? What's that going to be like? And so you're kind of processing all of that as well. And what can come with that sometimes is feelings of guilt. People can not intentionally, but project their fears onto you. And so you're processing all of that, and it can cause you to question, am I doing the right thing? So that's something to be aware of. They'll also be preparing their kids to go, and so there's lots of emotions involved in that. I know as a mother, for me, when I was preparing to go and talking to my daughter, who at the time was 4, and telling her we were going overseas, she didn't have any concept of what that really meant, but I was processing myself, my own fears in taking my children overseas. And so, even just telling your kids and preparing them to go, they're going to be facing, if they're parents, the challenges of that. Managing expectations, I think, is another huge area to be aware of when preparing to go, and in helping people when they're preparing to go. So in most cases, the first 2 to 3 years of going will be language learning and cultural learning. When you first get there, you spend a lot of time just adapting to the new culture, setting up your family in a new home, working out where to go shopping, buying furniture, working out how to travel around, getting visas, getting the kids into schools. And I think sometimes when preparing to go, we can have, people who go can have a very glorified view of what going overseas can look like. And actually, when you first go, there's just so much practically to get on with. And so managing those expectations at the beginning and releasing people that the preparations that they're making, and when they land in those early days of language learning, all of that is good and part of the work of going. And it's important to do it well and take your time and walk in the grace of God in that, because that's all part of the work of going. That is actually the real stuff. And so something you can do to help them in that is to help them to celebrate their day-to-day victories when they're there, on a kind of day-to-day basis, getting them to think about what life might look like, so their expectations are right for when they arrive. I think another thing to consider is, what is the person or couple or family's purpose in going overseas? So for some people, they go overseas specifically to lead a church plant or to join a church plant, and they may be supported full-time in the work that they're doing overseas. For others, they could be going to get a job in a cross-cultural context, and they're going to join the church planting team as well, but their main focus might be business as mission, and using business as a transformational tool. So therefore you need to help them to have fair expectations, and I think them being able to think that through beforehand is really helpful. You know, what does success look like for them, and the purpose of them going overseas, and helping them to just process that. I think counting the cost is another big area that goes on when someone's preparing to go cross-culturally. You know, you're going into a very different culture and context to what you're used to. You're going to be learning a different language, you're going to be learning all about a different culture, and there's going to be lots of changes that are going to happen in you in the process. And so you're counting the cost of what that means, even in the preparation stage of going. And so certain fears and uncertainties and insecurities can rise up during that time. And so being aware of that and walking alongside people in that, and letting them process and talk about what their fears are, and praying with them through those things. They may have uncertainties about their career, financial uncertainty, will God provide? And then also grief over what they're leaving behind, friendships, career, home, everything that they've known. You know, some people when they go overseas, they do a lot of the grieving before they go, so they're kind of pre-grievers. Some people grieve when they get there, and after the event of going. Some people it takes a couple of years after being there for the grief to really hit, but just being aware of that. I know for me, there was a lot of pre-grieving that went on, so being aware of that and the cost that they're taking in going. And then safety fears is another one. Often when people are going to an unreached context, it's a context where it may be illegal to share the gospel. There may be potential consequences for them in sharing the gospel. So they'll be thinking about that. They'll be thinking about the safety of themselves. What if they share the gospel and they receive persecution? Personal safety, safety of their children in going to a potentially hostile environment. They're going to be processing all those things and thinking about those. So helping them to think those things through and talk those things through and really pray through those things. So those are some of the unique challenges of going cross-culturally in preparing to go. And next I'm going to talk about the challenges that they could face that are unique to a cross-cultural context once they're actually in context when they've arrived.